Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something literally all of us have experienced, but probably never fully understood: the fascinating biological differences in how men and women chemically process and relieve stress. Seriously, we've all been there, right? A massive, stressful day hits, and one person just wants to sprint 5 miles in total, absolute silence. Meanwhile, someone else desperately needs to crash on the couch and talk through every single microscopic detail for an hour. So what's actually happening beneath the surface? Today, we're looking strictly at the science to see how our bodies are hardwired to handle pressure, and why a fix that works perfectly for one person might completely fail for another. Let's get right into it. Here's a quick look at our agenda. We'll kick things off with the biology of stress, move into how men and women specifically relieve that stress, check out the biological tug-of-war happening inside us, and finally wrap up with how to actually trigger natural relief. Starting off with Section 1, the biology of stress, and this idea of a chemical divergence. We've got to look at the baseline of how human bodies react when the pressure gets cranked up. So why do men and women handle stress so incredibly differently? It's the ultimate question we're answering today. And the big takeaway here: stress relief isn't just a quirky personality trait or someone just being stubborn. It's heavily, heavily dictated by our hormones. We are talking about a very real, very physical chemical reality unfolding right inside our nervous systems. Now, while men typically default to that classic fight-or-flight baseline, women actually possess this unique biological superpower that scientists call the tend and befriend response. And look, both of these are brilliant evolutionary survival mechanisms, but here's the catch: they require completely different chemical processes to bring the body back down to a calm baseline. For one, the brain is basically screaming, "I need to conquer a physical threat." But for the other, the brain is saying, "I need to secure my community to ensure safety." Moving right along to Section 2, how men relieve stress, or what we'll call the action toolkit. Let's see how this baseline biology builds into the specific chemical tools men rely on. Whenever we talk about stress relief, our minds almost always jump straight to oxytocin, right? The famous cuddle chemical. And sure, men do produce and benefit from oxytocin, but they actually rely heavily on a closely related peptide hormone called vasopressin, especially in social and competitive environments. While oxytocin calms us through comfort, vasopressin is a bit different. It induces calm by making men feel protective, capable, and bonded through a shared challenge. Think of a group of guys silently working together to fix a busted car engine on the side of the road in the pouring rain. That shared high-pressure problem-solving, that is actively lowering their cortisol through a massive hit of vasopressin. Let's track the biological journey of these social stress busters. Both oxytocin and vasopressin are tiny peptide hormones made of just 9 amino acids. Their journey kicks off in the brain's smart control center, the hypothalamus, where they're synthesized in specialized nerve cells. From there, they travel down to be stored in the pituitary gland, which is this little pea-sized structure at the base of the brain. Finally, the release is triggered. For oxytocin, positive physical touch or visualizing a safe connection sends an electrical signal to dump the hormone into the bloodstream. But for vasopressin, that release is specifically triggered when men engage in team-building activities, play sports, or work together to solve a really difficult problem. Beyond social bonding, men also rely heavily on a physical relief team made up of endorphins and dopamine. When a man is under acute physical or psychological stress, say dealing with a massive looming deadline at work or navigating an unexpected crisis, the body uses these natural painkillers and reward chemicals to actively suppress those overwhelming sensations. This physical relief team is a totally crucial part of finally exiting that intense fight-or-flight state. Here's the key difference. Unlike oxytocin, which basically needs a sense of safety and comfort to be released, endorphins are produced directly in response to exertion or mild stress. When stress hits hard, the brain activates the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. As the pituitary gland pumps out hormones to deal with the stress, it simultaneously manufactures and secretes beta endorphins. Heavy weightlifting, high-intensity cardio, deep belly laughter, or even regretting that incredibly spicy hot wing you just ate, all of that can trigger a massive rush of these endorphins. They bind to the brain's opiate receptors, essentially blocking pain signals and creating that euphoric, stress-free state we call a runner's high. All right, Section 3, how women relieve stress, or the connection toolkit. Now that we've seen the male action toolkit, let's pivot and examine the unique hormonal superpower driving the female tend and befriend response. When it comes to oxytocin, men and women actually process it completely differently, all because of their primary sex hormones. Get this: a man's testosterone actually blocks or at least dampens the calming, nurturing effects of oxytocin. Crazy, right? But a woman's estrogen, it acts exactly like an amplifier for those calming hormones. As oxytocin is being made in the hypothalamus, estrogen enhances the brain's sensitivity to it by jacking up the number of oxytocin receptors. So for a woman, even a tiny amount of oxytocin has a massive calming effect. It instantly dampens the amygdala. Just picture that deep almond-shaped fear center in the brain, shutting down the alarm bells and replacing all that anxiety with feelings of safety, warmth, and social connection. On top of oxytocin acting as the ultimate stress shield, women also rely heavily on progesterone. You can think of progesterone as the brain's natural sedative. One of its absolute main jobs is to soothe the central nervous system and calm the brain down after an adrenaline-fueled event, bringing her whole system back into balance. Without it, that adrenaline would literally just keep firing, leaving her stuck in a constant state of high alert. Let's trace progesterone's path, almost like a relay race. It's deeply tied to a woman's monthly cycle, starting in the ovaries, where it's manufactured by a temporary gland called the corpus luteum right after ovulation. The baton is then passed into the bloodstream, crossing over into the brain, where it transforms into a neurosteroid compound called allopregnanolone. This compound then crosses the finish line by binding to GABA receptors in the brain. And since GABA is basically the brain's primary off switch for anxiety, enhancing it allows progesterone to act like a powerful natural sedative. It slows down those racing thoughts and promotes deep, restorative sleep. Which brings us to Section 4, the biological tug-of-war, where hormones are in conflict. Because both of these incredible biological toolkits we just talked about face some pretty serious internal obstacles. When we zoom in on male biology, a super clear chemical conflict pops up. Prolonged high cortisol, that's our main stress hormone, actively suppresses testosterone, and that suppression can cause intense fatigue and severe mood crashes in men. At the same time, because testosterone slightly reduces oxytocin's effectiveness, men naturally seek stress relief through physical action or by just needing some personal space. They're not just being avoidant. They literally need to clear that mental stress by triggering endorphins through physical movement or labor. Have you ever wondered why a stressed out guy might suddenly start furiously organizing the garage out of nowhere? That's his biology demanding an endorphin release. On the flip side, the female tug-of-war presents its own really unique challenges. For women, high chronic stress drives up cortisol and adrenaline, which, get this, actually steals the raw ingredients needed to make her natural sedative, progesterone. It creates this deeply frustrating hormonal imbalance that just skyrockets anxiety. Add to that the fact that progesterone levels naturally drop right before a period, and it makes women so much more vulnerable to acute stress during that specific window. Because her oxytocin is amplified by estrogen, her biology practically demands social connection and talking through problems just to combat those inevitable cortisol spikes. Moving to our final part, Section 5, Triggering Natural Relief. This is the actionable biology. Now that we understand the chemistry and the conflicts, let's look at exactly how to trigger natural relief for both biology types. To successfully pull a man's brain out of that fight-or-flight state, we have to activate his specific chemical toolkit. The absolutely fastest paths? Intense physical exercise to dump a massive amount of endorphins and flush the physical tension out of his system. Or meaningful physical touch and intimacy, which releases that necessary oxytocin. And really importantly, tackling a tough goal or project with trusted friends. That triggers a flood of vasopressin, totally satisfying that deep biological need to problem solve alongside allies. Now, because a woman's biology thrives on safety and connection, her fastest path to lowering cortisol looks pretty different. While physical exercise is obviously great for everyone, a woman's natural tend and befriend response is best activated through verbal processing and emotional connection. Having deep conversations and venting to a trusted friend, that isn't just socializing, it's literally flooding her system with oxytocin to put out the cortisol fire. Plus, prioritizing real rest and downtime is absolutely critical. She needs that to preserve and protect those natural, calming progesterone levels from being stolen by chronic stress. Honestly, understanding these biological superpowers completely changes how we view ourselves and the people around us. Stress relief is absolutely not a one-size-fits-all scenario. It's a highly specialized chemical response. So next time the pressure mounts and your cortisol starts spiking, I want you to think about your own hormonal toolkit. How is your chemistry going to respond? Are you going to fight, flee, tend, or befriend? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope you leave today feeling equipped with the knowledge to trigger your own natural relief.